Over the last 30 years or so, hundreds of commercial fisheries have sprung up all over the UK. And we've seen all types of fisheries. We've seen massive open waters down to little snake lakes, little farmers' ponds. And we've all got our favourite fishery. But I've come to one today that I've never been to before. And it's an interesting project because we're just in the West Midlands. This is MAP Marston Fields Fishery. And you've got father and son duo, Dale and Neil Jackson, and they're building a fishery from the ground up. This was just basically a farmer's ponds with some open lakes, lots of weed, no access, no bankside maintenance, and they have started a mammoth project which we're going to talk to you all about today. So we've come and sat on peg 2 on the beach lake, and it's a very cold, crisp winter's day, quite windy as well. So actually I chose myself a method that can handle the conditions, which is a little maggot feeder. But before I get too deep into the fishing, let's take you around the lakes and show you in a little bit more detail all the work that Neil and Dale have been doing here at Marston Fields. So Marston Fields is located just off the M42 north of the Birmingham airport, and with easy access which continues right into the entrance of the fishery and right around the fishery, where you can take your car, or you will be able to do, you'll be able to take your car right around these pegs, and it'll make it a really nice accessible commercial fishery. The lads have obviously, as I said, starting to build this project from the ground up, and you can see right behind me here, which is Willow Lake, a work in progress, where they're changing the whole contour of the lake to make it more suitable. So these lakes were very deep, and basically they've been shallowed up, and the sculpture and the landscaping that's going off here is incredible. I'm actually stood on a brand new track here, which will give you access around the new curve lake. We've got elm over here. We've also got this complex of new lakes, which we're going to have a little chuck on today and see if we can catch some fish. There's everything going off, and this is going to be a kind of mecca for this area, because over in the background they've also got construction work going off on a big building which is going to house a cafe. It's going to house the tackle shop, which they tell me is going to be a big one. There's even going to be accommodation on here. So they're going to create this like destination right here in the Midlands, which I also know is teeming with fish. So we're going to give you a little bit of a run around the fishery and show you what's in store for when you come. So behind me here you see the Curve Lake. Now I know you're all big YouTube fans because obviously you're watching this video, and so you'll be familiar with Winning Ways, which is Andy May and Jamie Hughes' channel, and those lads have had quite a bit of input into the design of this lake. So this is a purpose designed match lake, lends itself ideally to pole fishing. It'll be a great club water. It's the right depth with the right distance so you can get across to the other side. You'll have good margin pegs, and it's perfectly suited. So we expect to see quite a few lads coming on here. Club matches will be perfect, and open matches as well. So there's a little bit to cater for everybody, including the curve. So Joe and I are not the only crazy fools that have braved this freezing cold winter day on typical British weather. We've had a bit of rain and there's a biting wind. And there's a couple of anglers here on Elm Lake. Now this one is the one that appeals to me. It's got a central island like a donut shaped lake, but with 25 metres of water on average in front of you. So that lends itself to some feeder work. You'll be able to catch in the open water in the summertime. We've got some good shallow fishing, and of course great margins. Slightly bigger lake with 36 anglers. It's 36 pegs on there. That'll be great for a club match, and it'll host open matches. And I'm interested to see, because it's created this like sort of big banking around it, which will create an arena, which they tell me, you know, if you ever wanted to have a spectative match on here, this would be a perfect lake for it. So we're down literally here on Willow Lake, and this is a great example of the work that's going off here at Marston. So this lake's been drained, and we're actually stood now where your top 2 and 2 line would probably be. So there'd be carp swimming around here normally. But a lot of the lakes here on the sort of complex were really deep, and they don't lend themselves perfectly to, you know, commercial carp fishing and commercial fisheries, because there's a few reasons. When it's really deep, the fish don't want to be down there in the summer, and they're all shallow, and sometimes it makes them hard to catch. But generally, obviously, to get a nice balanced fishery, you need the right ratio of water to fish. So what they're actually doing is this lake currently had an island in it, a small one, and they're expanding that island, and you'll see the spoil behind me here, which is sort of hardcore, which is just going to lift the whole level of the bottom of the lake upwards, so it makes it more suitable for what we know as commercial carp fishing. Fantastic to see it when it's drained. Another prime example of the work that's been carried out, you'll actually see a tipper lorry reversing down onto Willow, onto this sort of extended artificial island. So they've actually built a dry bridge across to the island so they can access that with machinery, and this wagoneer will just dump his load on here, and then the digger will spread it around, and they'll be compacting that as they go along. And I know that locally, in fact, I've seen the clay pit just over the back here, there's the right sort of clay that they can use to puddle the bottom of these lakes, and obviously that's what gives the lakes their, if you like, waterproof lining. So they've got everything they need naturally close by. So you can see what's going off and how your local fishery has probably been built before you arrived. So we dropped down onto the Oak Lake, which is more of an established lake here, and we know for a fact this has got a massive head of skimmers in it. Weights of up to 100 pound of skimmers is very common. And while I am here, it's probably worth mentioning that the construction in this area has not just been carried out by Marston Fields. Right behind the fishery is where the famous white elephant, the HS2 railway network, is actually being constructed. And while we've actually been filming, we've watched them constructing the concrete sort of tubes that they're making. It's a phenomenal piece of equipment, which, you know, hopefully one day will be worth it. But that'll all be gone by the time this work is finished here, and landscaping can start, and what will be taken from this sort of work in progress site will become your favourite fishery. And lakes aren't the only thing that's getting constructed here. Behind me you'll see the new building that's been erected, which will house the cafe, the tackle shop, and I believe accommodation. So, and I think some workshops for the lads here, because when they're doing the pellets and obviously keeping the fishery maintained through the year, they'll need somewhere to work. Mammoth task going off here, really is. So obviously we couldn't come all the way down here and not bring us fishing tackle, so we're going to jump on what is now Beach Lake, but was formerly Sycamore. And what they've actually done here is extended the central island right to the ends and subdivided this 50 peg lake into 4 smaller lakes, which is more manageable, easier to control. And obviously with a lake like this, sometimes it can be wind affected, so by dividing it up, that actually creates 4 separate winded ends. So regardless of where it's going, the fish will move around on that. So we're going to have a little fish on here and just see what it's all about. So we've obviously opted for this maggot feeder, and the lads here tell me that this particular lake's got a lot of sort of 3 to 8 pound fish in it, and that for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the time of year or just the fish themselves, that they respond to maggots. Maggots, it seems like, is a really effective bait for them. So I've just rigged up with a smallish hook. So it's a nice small 18 911, and I've tied that to 016 line just in case we hook some of them bigger fish. But I'm just loading that with a couple of maggots. So it's not particularly a big hook, because when you've got a maggot hook bait, obviously you can just hook them, and I'm actually hooking these because I'm fishing double maggot. I'm hooking them in the thin end, which leaves more hook exposed. And then I've got a Camasan black cap, which is a feeder that stood the test of time. That's a small one, a mini actually, and that's only 10 grams, because you don't need a lot of weight. And we're casting that over into the corner of the lake, which is surprisingly shallow, and it's amazing that the fish are actually sat in that sort of shallower water. But I've got like a 12 to 14 inch up length on a sliding rig, and just basically dropping that in. I've actually cut the slots out on that feeder to allow the bait to come out, because I'm cold, the maggots are cold, and we need the maggots to come out of the feeder so that the fish can get to them. And the beauty about maggots is that I think the fish can sense them, but you're not in a danger of overfeeding your peg, because there's not a lot of sort of food content in a few maggots. And then just watching out again, an odd indication. There's obviously a few fish that shoaled up, and it's quite surprising really that in this freezing bitter wind that the fish are actually windward end. But the lads here have sort of said to me that that's how they seem to want to be, and it's quite apparent that they're spot on, because we've had bites and indications there straight away. So you'll probably have noticed behind me that the landscape looks very new, and this lake is brand new, and that's because it is new and obviously still under construction. But because of the groundwork and the backwork that these lads are doing, it won't be long before this is lush green, and there'll be trees and reeds and rushes, and everything will be grown up, and it'll look exactly like the fishery that you obviously fish on a regular basis. But all fisheries start off like this, and obviously I don't think people understand sometimes that there's a lot of work gone into the background. That, you know, you just turn up at a fishery and, oh, it's great and it's this, and it takes time, effort, lots of money, and obviously years for things to get established. But I think, you know, my opinion is it's great to see that we've got a new fishery, because there's a plethora of fisheries up and down the country that you can choose from, but a new one which is, you know, they've got all the experience of what other fisheries have gone through, they've got the experience of what the customer wants, and the match anglers are these two guys, and that means that they're concentrating on building this as a match fishery. So open matches and club matches will be, well, they'll find everything they need right on the doorstep just here. So as always with me, it's a dead simple rig, obviously a commercial fishery, so free running, and I've just done my simple feeder rig, which is this 6 pound detection, straight through, tied back with my little running paternoster style, which you can see on our YouTube channel. There's a separate video for that rig, and I've just got a little hook length off the bottom of that, and that's about 18 inches in total, which seems to have been the most effective way to catch them today. And then just a snap link swivel, to which I've got that small black cap, and you'll see that I've elongated the holes, because obviously I want that bait to come out freely, and the fish to be able to get to a bit of free offerings, and encourage them to start feeding on the maggots, so that when they come across that double maggot hook bait on that hook, that 18, then they'll know what they're looking at, and just fishing away nice and bonny into the corner and catching some of these fantastic carp that there seems to be plenty of, which on a freezing cold winter's day, it's been cracking sport. I can only imagine what it's like here in the summertime when these fish are really wanting to feed. Got another one, and as they told us that these fish are all hard fighting carp, and they also tell me that this lake has got purely just carp in it, so there's no small fish or silverfish, so you know that when you get a little dink or an indication, it's not a roach that smashed your bait up. You can sit and wait, and a lot of my bites today have either been a quick dink, because they've obviously picked up the bait and disturbed the feeder, or they've been a proper drag round. Oh, that went to Andy May scoop, were it? That's better. Cracking sport on a cold day. I mean, this is a really enjoyable day, and because it's a fishery I've never been to before, I was quite excited to put my box down. But when it's so cold as it is, you know, we've just come off the back of a freezing cold weekend, we've had lots of cold rain and some storms. It's actually amazing how good the fishing is, and that is testament to the work that's been done here. And I'm amazed actually how good it is, because it's been a carp, I think, just about every single cast, and we'll just set ourselves up for another one. Well, despite the weather, the fish have been more than obliging, and it's been a great day's sport in winter, and I'm certainly looking forward to coming back, probably when the weather's a little bit warmer, and it'll be interesting to see how the fishery's developed and all the work that's gone off has come to fruition. But don't just take my word for it. Get yourself down to Marston Fields, enjoy some carp action like I have, and see what it's all about. What a great place.